The spoon clinked against the ceramic bowl as Ray Morgan carefully lifted another helping of oatmeal. He blew on it gently before guiding it toward his mother's lips. Mary Morgan sat slumped in her wheelchair beside the window of her Silver Pines room, morning sunlight catching the silver strands of her thinning hair. "Easy, Mom," Ray said softly as she struggled to swallow. "Take your time." At 85, Mary had shrunk to barely 90 pounds. Her hands, one strong from decades of waitressing at Murphy's Diner, now trembled like autumn leaves in her lap. The dementia had taken so much from her, but her eyes still held flickers of the woman who had raised him alone after his father walked out. "Who are you?" Mary asked, studying his face with the confusion that greeted him most mornings. Ray's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm Ray, Mom. Your son." Mary blinked slowly, processing the information. Ray, the name seemed to drift just beyond her grasp, like trying to catch smoke. She frowned, concentrating. "Ray works at the warehouse. Big company. Made good money." "That's right. I worked in logistics for 23 years. You had a good job." Mary nodded, pleased with herself for remembering. "Why are you here? Shouldn't you be at work?" Ray set the spoon down and pulled his chair closer. He'd had this conversation hundreds of times, but he never let impatience creep into his voice. "I retired early, Mom, to take care of you." "Oh," Mary looked confused again. "That doesn't sound right. You love that job. I love you more." Mary's gaze wandered to the framed photo on her bedside table. Nina's graduation picture from 2 years ago, her cap slightly crooked, her smile bright with promise. Mary's face softened with recognition. "That's my granddaughter," she said with sudden clarity. "Nina. She's getting married soon." Ray felt the familiar ache in his throat. His mother could forget his name for hours, but she had never forgotten Nana's face, or the wedding that had consumed their family's planning for months. "That's right, Mom. Next month. She's so beautiful." Mary reached toward the photo with shaking fingers. "Just like her mother was at that age," she murmured, before trailing off, lost in memories she couldn't quite grasp. "Nina wants you at her wedding," Ray said carefully. Mary's eyes filled with tears. "I wish I could see her wedding. I probably won't live that long. The doctors said." She stopped, suddenly less frightened. "What do they say again?" Ray took her cold hands in his. "The doctors don't know everything. But Ray, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast. How can I go to a wedding? I'll embarrass everyone. I'll forget where I am. Forget who people are. You won't embarrass anyone. You're the bride's grandmother. You belong there." Mary shook her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I don't want to ruin her special day. Maybe it's better if I just stay here and watch the photos later." "Mom, look at me." Ray waited until her clouded eyes focused on his face. "You raised me after Dad left. You worked double shifts to keep food on our table and clothes on my back. You never missed a school play or baseball game, even when you were dead tired. You deserve to see Nina walk down that aisle. But what if I don't remember it? Then I'll remember for you, and I'll tell you about it every day for the rest of your life." Mary studied his face for a long moment. "You mean it? I swear it on Dad's grave." Mary's eyes focused with startling clarity. "Your father was a coward who ran when things got hard. You're not like him." "No, I'm not. Promise me something, Ray. Anything. If I do make it to the wedding, don't let me be a burden. If I get confused or scared, don't make a scene. Just take me back here quietly." Ray squeezed her hands tighter. "You could never be a burden. You're the guest of honor." Mary smiled weakly. "I raised a good man. You raised a stubborn man who keeps his promises." The promise hung between them like a sacred vow. Ray meant every word. He would move heaven and earth to get his mother to that wedding, no matter what obstacles stood in his way. "Now," Ray said, picking up the spoon again, "let's finish breakfast. You need your strength." As he fed her the remaining oatmeal, Mary kept glancing at Nina's photo. "Tell me about the wedding plans again." I forget sometimes. Ray spent the next hour describing every detail he knew about the ceremony. The flowers, the music, the dress. He left out one crucial detail he hadn't yet shared with anyone. He already knew exactly where the wedding would take place, and he knew his wife and mother-in-law would hate every second of it. But Mary would be there. That was all that mattered. That evening, Ray sat at the head of his mahogany dining table, watching his family pick at the pot roast dinner he prepared. The dining room felt smaller than usual, tension thick, as the gravy cooling on their plates. Lila sat to his right, her attention divided between her barely touched food and her phone screen. She scrolled through social media posts with the intensity of someone hunting for treasure, occasionally pausing to like or comment. Her manicured nails clicked against the phone case in a rhythm that grated on Ray's nerves. "Mom, could you put the phone away?" Nina asked gently. "We wanted to talk about the wedding." "Just finishing up some important messages," Leela said without looking up. "The charity board is planning our spring fundraiser." Across the table, Nina held hands with Trevor. Both young faces glowed with the excitement that came with planning their future together. Trevor wore his good shirt, the blue one Nina had bought him for family dinners. His hands were clean, but still bore the permanent stains of a mechanic who worked with his hands for a living. Judith Calloway, Leela's mother, sat at the far end of the table like a queen holding court. At 69, she maintained a rigid posture and sharp tongue that had served her well in Ashford Hollow's social circle for decades. She cut her pot roast with surgical precision, each piece exactly the same size. "Nina, darling," Judith said, setting down her knife, "have you made a final decision about the venue? The Ashford Hills Country Club has that gorgeous ballroom with the crystal chandeliers. I spoke to Margaret Thorne yesterday, and she said they had a cancellation for your date." Nina glanced at Trevor, then at her grandmother. "Actually, Grandma Judy, we've made our decision." "Dad." She looked to Ray. Ray cleared his throat and set down his fork. "The wedding will be held at Silver Pines Nursing Home." The words fell into silence like stones into still water. Lila's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto her plate. Judith's fork stopped midway to her mouth. Trevor squeezed Nina's hand tighter. "What?" Lila's laugh came out sharp and nervous. "That's a joke, right?" "Ray, please tell me you're joking." "No joke. It's the only way Mom can attend." Judith set down her fork with deliberate care. "Raymond, surely you can't be serious. What kind of man marries off his daughter in a place that smells like despair and disinfectant? A man who keeps his promises to his mother." "Ray," Leela said, her voice rising. "Think about what you're saying. Think about the photos. Think about what people will say. We'll be the laughing stock of this entire town." Trevor leaned forward, his calloused hands clasped together. "Mrs. Morgan, with all due respect, we think it's beautiful. Grandma Mary has been looking forward to this wedding for months. She deserves to be there." "Beautiful?" Judith's voice dripped with disdain. "Young man, you want to exchange sacred vows next to bedpans and wheelchairs. What about ambience? What about romance? What will the guests think when they have to sit in some sterile institutional room surrounded by the smell of medicine and the moaning of ill people?" Ray's jaw hardened. "My mother isn't dying people. She's family." "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." Ray's voice stayed level, but ice crept into his tone. "You've made it clear what you think about my mother from the moment she moved into Silver Pines." "I never said anything against Mary," Judith protested. "You said putting her in that place was giving up. You said she'd be better off in a state facility where she wouldn't be a financial burden." Judith's face flushed. "I was thinking practically. You were thinking about your reputation." Leela jumped in quickly. "Ray, let's not rehash old arguments. The point is, we need to think about Nina's future. These photos will be online forever. Her children will see them. Her friends will judge her. Her friends will see a family that values love over appearances," Nina said firmly. "Nina, sweetheart," Leela reached across the table toward her daughter. You're young. You don't understand how these things follow you. A wedding sets the tone for your entire marriage. It's a reflection of your values, your status in the community. My values include honoring my grandmother." Judith leaned forward, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she used for charity board meetings. "Darling, we're not asking you to dishonor anyone. We're simply suggesting there are alternatives. We could hire a medical transport service. Bring Mary to a proper venue for just the ceremony." "She can barely sit up for an hour," Ray said. The stress of being moved, dressed up, transported to an unfamiliar place, it could truly hurt her. "Then perhaps," Judith began delicately. "Perhaps what?" Ray's voice cut through the dining room like a blade. "Perhaps we should let her be alone while we dance at some fancy country club. Perhaps we should pretend she doesn't exist because it's inconvenient for your social calendar." "That's not fair." "Fair." Ray stood slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You want to talk about fair? My mother worked 2 jobs to raise me after my father abandoned us. She waited tables at Murphy's Diner for 30 years, coming home with aching feet and grease stains on her uniform so I could have school clothes and lunch money. She never missed a parent-teacher conference, never forgot a birthday, never complained about the sacrifices she made. And now, when she's asking for one thing, to see her granddaughter get married, you want to deny her that because it might embarrass you in front of your country club friends." Nina's eyes filled with tears. "Dad's right. Grandma Mary comes first." "Nana." Layla's voice cracked with desperation. "Think about your future children. Think about showing them these wedding photos. What will you tell them when they ask why their grandma got married in a nursing home?" "I'll tell them their mother chose love over status," Nina said, her voice carrying steel that reminded Judith uncomfortably of Ray. "I'll tell them about their great-grandmother who worked her whole life to give her family a better future, and how we honored her when she needed us most. But the cost," Judith tried again, "will be a fraction of what you'd spend at the country club," Trevor said quietly, "and every penny will go toward making Grandma Mary comfortable and happy." Leela turned to Ray with pleading eyes. "Ray, please, think about our reputation. Think about my position on the charity board. Think about what this will do to our standing in the community." "I don't care about your standing in the community," he said. "How can you say that? We've worked for years to build our reputation in this town. You've worked to build your reputation. I've worked to build a life worth living." Judith straightened in her chair, her voice taking on the imperious tone she reserved for servants and subordinates. "Raymond, I understand you feel loyal to your mother. That's admirable, but loyalty shouldn't blind you to practical considerations. A wedding is about more than sentiment. It's about establishing your daughter's place in society. My daughter's place in society is wherever she chooses to put herself. She doesn't need your approval or anyone else's, but she needs our support. She has my support. She doesn't need yours." Ray walked toward the dining room door, his back straight as a steel beam, the weight of 3 generations of expectations pressing against his shoulders. But he didn't bend. "Where are you going?" Leela called after him. He paused in the doorway, not turning around. "To tell Mom she's going to see her granddaughter's wedding." "Ray, we're not finished discussing this." "Yes, we are." The front door closed behind him with quiet finality, leaving the dining room in stunned silence. Through the window, they watched him walk down the street toward Silver Pines, his stride purposeful and determined. "He'll come to his senses," Judith said finally. "When he realizes what this will cost us socially, he'll change his mind." But Nina and Trevor exchanged a look that said otherwise. They knew Ray Morgan better than that. When he made a promise, especially to his mother, nothing in the world could make him break it. 3 days later, Leela's dining room buzzed with the carefully modulated voices of Ashford Hollow's social elite. 5 women gathered around the antique mahogany table, crystal mimosa glasses catching the afternoon light streaming through the lace curtains. The finger sandwiches and petit fours were arranged on Leela's grandmother's china, each piece a small weapon in the ongoing war of social status. "I simply cannot believe it," Judith said for the third time, shaking her perfectly coiffed head. A nursing home wedding. Can you imagine? Patricia Wells, wife of the bank president, paused with her teacup halfway to her lips. It's so. She searched for a word that would convey her distaste without sounding completely heartless. Depressing. Poor Nana, added Rebecca Stone, whose husband owned the largest real estate agency in town. She'll regret this for the rest of her life. Wedding photos are forever, you know. What will she tell her children? Leila sipped her mimosa and scrolled through her phone, checking social media notifications with the dedication of a stock trader watching market fluctuations. Ray won't listen to reason. He's completely obsessed with his mother. It's become unhealthy, really. Men and their mothers, Judith sniffed, with the authority of someone who had managed to outlive 2 husbands. It's unnatural at his age. He's 52 years old, for heaven's sake. Margaret Thornton, the newest member of their circle and owner of the town's most exclusive boutique, leaned forward with interest. What does Trevor's family think about all this? Surely they have some influence. Leila waved her hand dismissively. They're blue-collar people. His father works at the Ford plant. His mother cleans houses. They probably think it's charming, having a wedding in a nursing home. Very down-to-earth and authentic. The way she said authentic made it sound like a communicable disease. Have you tried talking to Nana directly? Rebecca asked, her eyes bright with the prospect of useful gossip. Sometimes these young girls just need someone to explain the long-term consequences of their decisions. That's exactly what we're going to do, Judith declared, setting down her teacup with the finality of a judge's gavel. Nina's young and romantic. She doesn't understand the social implications of what she's agreeing to. She needs guidance from women who understand how the world really works. Patricia nodded sagely. Reputation is everything in a town this size. One bad decision can follow you for decades. Exactly, Leila said, finally looking up from her phone. This isn't just about one day. This is about how people will see our family for years to come. Every time someone mentions Nina's wedding, they'll remember the nursing home. They'll whisper about it at every social event. Margaret shuddered delicately. I can only imagine what the country club set will say. They're already talking, you know. Word gets around fast in a place like this. Were they saying? Judith demanded. Oh, the usual things, that Ray has lost perspective, that he's putting his mother's feelings above his daughter's future. Some are even questioning whether the family can really afford a proper wedding. And this is just an excuse to cut costs. Lila's face flushed with embarrassment. That's ridiculous. Ray has excellent insurance benefits from his logistics job. We could easily afford the country club. But people don't know that, Patricia pointed out. Appearances matter. If you look like you're cutting corners, people assume you are. An hour later, the social circle had departed, leaving behind empty glasses and a dining room thick with the perfume of shared superiority. Lila immediately called Nina and demanded she come over for an important family discussion. Nina arrived 20 minutes later, her face already flushed with defensive anger. She had learned to recognize the tone in her mother's voice that preceded these ambush conversations. Sit down, sweetheart, Lila said, gesturing to the chair across from her and Judith. We need to talk about your wedding plans. If this is about the venue, we've already decided. Just hear us out. Judith interrupted smoothly. We're not here to argue. We're here to offer you alternatives. Nina remained standing, her arms crossed. What kind of alternatives? We want to give you a proper wedding, Lila said, her voice taking on the sweet tone she used when trying to manipulate someone. The country club, a string quartet, real flowers instead of whatever artificial arrangements they can scrape together at that place. That place is where Grandma Mary lives. Darling, Judith said, leaning forward with practiced concern, you're thinking with your heart instead of your head. A wedding is about your future, not your past. It's about establishing yourself and Trevor as a couple worthy of respect in this community. This isn't about money, Nina, Lila added quickly. Your father has excellent insurance payouts from his old job. We have savings. We can afford to give you something beautiful, something you'll be proud to remember." Nina sat down heavily, recognizing she wouldn't be allowed to leave until they'd said their piece. "Go on. Think about your career," Judith continued. "You want to teach elementary school, correct? Well, teachers are held to certain standards in communities like this. Parents notice things. They remember things. Do you really want to be known as the teacher who had a nursing home wedding? And think about Trevor's business," Leela added. "He wants to open his own auto shop someday. Success in this town depends on reputation, on being accepted by the right people. How will it look if his wedding photos show him exchanging vows in a place where people go to spend their final days?" Nina's jaw tightened. Grandma Mary isn't going there to give up. She's living there because she needs care. "Of course, sweetheart. But that's not how other people will see it. They'll see a family that couldn't manage a proper celebration for their daughter's wedding. We're offering you everything you could want," Judith pressed. "A beautiful ballroom, professional photography, a reception your friends will talk about for years. All you have to do is say yes." Nina stood abruptly. "No, just think about it." "I said no." Nina's voice carried a firmness that reminded Judith uncomfortably of Ray, when he'd made up his mind about something. Grandma Mary raised Dad when his father walked out on them. She worked double shifts at the diner to pay for his school clothes and baseball equipment. She never missed a school play or parent conference, even when she was exhausted. "She deserves to see my wedding. But the photographs will show a family that values love over status." Nina grabbed her purse from the side table. "We'll show a grandmother who was honored by people who remembered what she sacrificed for them." "Nina, please. I'm marrying Trevor at Silver Pines next month, and that's final. If you can't support that decision, then you don't have to come." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Lila's face went pale. "You don't mean that. Try me." Nina walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "You know what's really sad? You're so worried about what strangers will think that you've forgotten what family actually means." Grandma Mary never forgot. Even with dementia, she remembers that love matters more than appearances. After Nina left, Leela and Judith sat in stunned silence. Finally, Leela pulled out her phone and opened a private social media account she created under a fake name. Her fingers trembled with anger as she typed. "Know someone planning a nursing home wedding. Some people have no class or consideration for family reputation. When keeping up appearances matters less than indulging in old woman's fantasies. Hashtag trashy. Hashtag social suicide. Hashtag family embarrassment." She hit post and felt a small, bitter surge of satisfaction. If Nina wanted to embarrass the family, at least the truth about their situation would be out there for people to see. Judith watched her daughter scroll through responses to the post, each like a nasty comet feeding their shared sense of righteousness. "She'll thank us later," Judith said finally, "when she realizes what a mistake this would have been." But even as she said it, she wasn't entirely convinced. There had been something in Nina's voice, something in the set of her shoulders, that reminded her exactly of the man who had walked out of their dinner 3 nights ago. And Raymond Morgan, for all his faults, had never been known to back down from a fight. The morning sun filtered through the old oak trees surrounding Silver Pines nursing home, casting dappled shadows across the garden patio where folding chairs sat in neat rows on the weathered concrete. Ray stood near the makeshift altar, adjusting his tie for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The transformation of the small patio space bordered on miraculous. The Silver Pine staff had worked through the night, stringing handmade paper garlands between the tree branches and arranging potted flowers from the activities room along the edges of the makeshift aisle. Someone had draped white sheets over the institutional metal chairs, and votives in mason jars lined the walkway, flickering softly in the morning breeze. "Nervous?" Ansel Briggs asked, straightening his pastoral collar. Ray's childhood friend had agreed to officiate without hesitation when Ray explained the circumstances about the wedding. No, about her making it through the ceremony. Ray's voice trailed off as he glanced toward the nursing home's rear entrance. She'll make it, Ansel said with quiet confidence. I've seen that woman fight through worse things than dementia to be where she needed to be. Inside the building, Mary sat in her wheelchair in the activities room, wearing her best dress, navy blue with small white flowers, that Nina had bought for her last Christmas. The fabric hung loose on her diminished frame, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks. Nina knelt beside the wheelchair, carefully adjusting her grandmother's corsage. You look beautiful, Grandma. Mary's fingers trembled as she reached up to touch Nina's cheek. The young bride wore a simple white dress, nothing fancy, but the joy radiating from her face made her glow like candlelight. You look like an angel, Mary whispered. Your grandfather would have loved to see this. He always said you'd be the most beautiful bride in North Carolina. Are you ready for this? It's going to be outside. Remember, if you get tired or confused, just squeeze my hand and we'll bring you back inside. Mary nodded, though her breathing seemed more labored than usual. I've been ready for months, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss this for the world. The small crowd of guests began to gather in the garden. Trevor's family had driven up from Charlotte, working-class people who understood the value of family loyalty. His father wore his best suit, the one reserved for weddings and funerals, while his mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Several of Ray's former co-workers attended, along with neighbors who had known Mary during her diner years. Ansel's wife managed the small musical element, playing gentle hymns on a portable keyboard they borrowed from a church. Notably absent were most of Leela's social circle. A few brave souls had shown up, curiosity overcoming their social hesitations, but they sat in the back rows, looking uncomfortable and out of place. Leela herself stood near the rear of the seating area, her arms crossed and her expression frozen in what might charitably be called polite displeasure. She had dressed as if attending a funeral rather than a wedding. Black dress, minimal jewelry, sunglasses that hid her eyes. Judith hadn't come at all, claiming a sudden migraine. Ladies and gentlemen, Ansel's voice carried across the small gathering. Please rise for the bride. Ray wheeled his mother out from the nursing home, positioning her wheelchair at the front of the makeshift aisle. Mary gripped his hand tightly, her eyes searching the unfamiliar faces around her. So many people, she whispered. They're all here for you and Nina. Ray murmured back. Everyone who matters. The small crowd rose as Nina appeared in the doorway. Trevor's arm linked through hers since Ray was with his mother. She'd chosen to walk herself down the aisle, and her face radiated such pure happiness that several guests reached for tissues. Trevor waited at the altar, his eyes bright with unshed tears. He wore his best suit, the one he bought specifically for this day, and his usually grease-stained hands were scrubbed clean and steady. As Nina walked past the rows of chairs, Mary suddenly gripped Ray's hand tighter. That's my granddaughter, she announced to no one in particular, her voice carrying across the garden. Isn't she beautiful? Several guests chuckled softly, and Nina paused to blow a kiss toward her grandmother before continuing to the altar. Mara Jensen, the local photographer Nina had hired, moved quietly around the edges of the gathering, capturing moments with the unobtrusive skill that had built her reputation. Something about the raw emotion in Ray's face as he watched his mother made her adjust her lens for a closer shot. Dearly beloved, Ansel began, his voice warm and steady, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Nina and Trevor in marriage. But we are also here to celebrate something deeper, the bonds of family, the power of love to transcend circumstances, and the courage to choose what matters most when the world tries to tell us otherwise. Mary leaned forward in her wheelchair, straining to hear every word. During the exchange of vows, her breathing became more labored, but she refused Ray's offer to take her inside. I'm not missing this, she whispered fiercely, as Trevor promised to love and honor Nina, through whatever challenges life might bring. Mary reached for Ray's hand. I'm glad I lived to see this, she said, her voice barely audible. That was when Ray's composure cracked. A tear rolled down his cheek as he squeezed his mother's frail fingers. In that moment, Mara caught the shot that would change everything. Ray's tear-stained face, his mother's peaceful smile, and the wedding celebration happening around them, all framed by the simple beauty of love conquering circumstances. "You may kiss the bride," Ansel announced. As Trevor and Nina kissed, the small crowd erupted in applause. Mary clapped with shaking hands, her face radiant with joy and triumph. She had made it. She had seen her granddaughter married, had witnessed the love and commitment that would carry the young couple into their future. The reception was simple, cake and punch served on folding tables in the same garden space. Mary managed to stay for 20 minutes, long enough to see Nana cut the cake and throw her bouquet, before exhaustion finally claimed her. "Take me inside now," she whispered to Ray. "I've seen what I needed to see." As Ray wheeled her back toward the nursing home, Mary reached up and caught his hand one more time. "Thank you," she said simply, "for keeping your promise." Ray kissed the top of her head, his heart full despite the tears still threatening to fall. "Thank you for teaching me what promises mean." Behind them, the reception continued in the garden, laughter and music drifting through the evening air. Lila sat alone at a table for 6, watching her daughter's joy with an expression that mixed love, regret, and something that might have been envy. She had attended her daughter's wedding, but she had missed its meaning entirely. That evening, Mara Jensen sat in her home office, scrolling through the hundreds of photos she'd captured at the nursing home wedding. As a professional photographer who specialized in life events, she had seen every kind of celebration imaginable. But something about today's ceremony had touched her differently. She paused at the image of Ray and Mary during the vows, his tear-stained face, her peaceful smile, the love radiating between them as they shared a moment that transcended the simple setting around them. The raw emotion in the photograph spoke to something universal about family, sacrifice, and the courage to choose love over convenience. Mara opened her business social media page and began crafting a caption. "This man brought the wedding to his mother before time could take her away." Sometimes, love means changing your plans. Sometimes it means a nursing home garden is more beautiful than any ballroom. Today I witnessed a family that understands what really matters. #LoveWins, #family, #wedding photography, #true love, #honor. She posted the image and closed her laptop, thinking nothing more of it than any other wedding posts she shared to promote her business. By morning, her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. The post had been shared hundreds of times overnight. Local news stations were calling. Her email inbox overflowed with messages from strangers moved by the story. Ray discovered the viral sensation when his own phone started ringing at 7 in the morning. "Mr. Morgan, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We'd love to do a story about your mother and yesterday's wedding. Our viewers are incredibly moved by your family story." "I'm not interested in publicity," Ray said, reaching for his coffee with his free hand. "Sir, I understand your reluctance, but your story is inspiring people across the country. We have comments from families in California, Texas, Florida. People who say your example has changed how they think about their own elderly relatives." Ray hung up without another word, but the calls kept coming. 3 more news stations, 2 newspapers, and a regional magazine all wanted interviews. His email inbox, which usually contained nothing more interesting than insurance notifications and pharmacy reminders, was flooded with messages from complete strangers. "My father has memory loss, and your story reminded me what really matters. I'm flying home this weekend to spend time with him. You're the kind of son I hope to raise. Thank you for showing the world what family loyalty looks like. Bless you and your mother. My grandmother died alone in a nursing home because we were all too busy with our own lives. You've inspired me to volunteer at our local facility. I'm a nurse at a memory care unit, and I see families abandon their loved ones every day. You give me hope that there are still people who understand what love really means." Ray read each message quietly, never responding, but feeling something shift in his chest. The support felt like armor against the judgment and criticism he'd endured from his own family. By noon, the local newspaper had picked up the story. By evening, it had been shared on regional news websites. The simple photograph of a son honoring his mother had touched something deep in the American consciousness, a longing for authentic family connection in an age of superficial social media relationships. The Silver Pines nursing home began receiving calls from across the state, families inquiring about services, volunteers offering to help with activities, donors asking how they could support the facility that had hosted such a beautiful celebration of love and commitment. Ray's former coworkers started forwarding him links to the story as it spread across social media platforms. Old friends from high school reached out to congratulate him. Even his insurance agent called to say how proud the whole company was of their former employee. But not everyone's response was positive. Lila burst through the front door the next morning like a woman fleeing a fire. Judith closed behind her. Both women looked frantic, their usual polished composure replaced by barely controlled panic. "Take it down," Lila demanded before Ray had even looked up from his morning coffee and newspaper. "Right now." Ray sat at his kitchen table, reading another email from a stranger whose father suffered from memory loss. He didn't acknowledge his wife's dramatic entrance. "I said take it down." Lila's voice cracked with hysteria. "Take what down?" Ray asked calmly, not lifting his eyes from the screen. "Don't play dumb with me. That photographer, that viral post. Make her remove it. Call her right now and demand she delete it." "Why would I do that?" Judith stepped forward, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Raymond, people think we're cold-hearted. My charity group has been fielding calls all morning. They want to know why we weren't prominently featured in the wedding photos. They want to know why the groom's blue-collar family looked more supportive than the bride's own mother and grandmother. Maybe because they were more supportive. We had prior commitments," Judith said weakly. "Social obligations that couldn't be canceled. You had prior prejudices that couldn't be overcome." Lila slammed her hand on the kitchen table, making Ray's coffee cup rattle. "This is destroying our reputation. People are calling us selfish, heartless, shallow. The comments on that post are vicious. They're saying we abandoned an elderly woman, that we care more about status than family." "You do. How dare you?" "How dare I what?" "Tell the truth. Point out that you've spent the last month complaining about the wedding venue instead of celebrating your daughter's happiness." Ray finally looked up, his eyes hard as winter stone. "I know about the anonymous posts, Lila. I know you mocked my mother online. I know you told your friends this wedding was beneath your social standards." Lila's face went white. "I never. Some people have no class or consideration for family reputation." Wasn't that your exact quote? The kitchen fell silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock. Judith grabbed Lila's arm, her grip tight enough to leave marks. "We need to fix this," Judith said desperately, privately, family to family, before this gets any worse. Ray stood slowly, walking to the window where he could see Silver Pines in the distance. The morning sun caught the windows of his mother's room, and he wondered if she was awake yet, if she remembered yesterday's wedding, if she was happy. "There's nothing to fix," he said, without turning around. "You showed your true colors. The whole world just happened to notice. Please," Lila's voice cracked, tears threatening. "Help us salvage this. Make a statement. Tell people we supported the wedding, that we were there, that we love Mary. I don't lie for cowards. Ray, I'm your wife. You're a woman who shares my last name. Nothing more." The words hit Lila like physical blows. She'd expected anger, argument, even fury. She hadn't expected this cold dismissal, this complete emotional detachment. "You can't do this to us," Judith said weakly. "We're family." Ray turned from the window, his face expressing nothing but tired disgust. Family doesn't abandon each other when times get hard. Family doesn't mock elderly relatives for social media likes. Family doesn't choose reputation over love. "We made mistakes. You made choices," Choices that revealed exactly who you are and what you value. Now you want me to lie to protect you from the consequences of those choices. What do you want from us? Leela asked desperately. An apology? We're sorry. We'll do anything to fix this. You're not sorry you hurt my mother. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry people are judging you the way you judged her. Ray walked back to the table and sat down, returning his attention to his email. You can see yourselves out. Ray, go. Out of my house. Leela and Judith left without another word, the front door closing behind them with a finality that echoed through the empty kitchen. Ray sat alone with his coffee and the messages from strangers who understood what his own family had failed to grasp. Outside, the sun continued to shine on Ashford Hollow, but inside the house where 3 generations had shared meals and arguments and Christmas mornings, something had broken that could never be repaired. 2 weeks later, Ray sat in the cluttered office of the Ashford Hollow Gazette, facing editor Tom Mitchell across a desk piled high with press releases, coffee-stained manuscripts, and the detritus of small-town journalism. The building smelled of old coffee and printer ink, with afternoon sunlight streaming through windows that hadn't been properly cleaned in months. I want to write about honoring our elderly, Ray said, his hands clasped in his lap, about families who understand what loyalty really means. Tom leaned back in his squeaking chair, studying Ray's face with the sharp eyes of a man who'd spent 30 years separating genuine news from publicity stunts. This about your mother's situation. The viral wedding story. It's about a community that's forgotten what matters. And you want to remind them. I want to tell the truth. Tom reached for his reading glasses and pushed aside a stack of restaurant grand opening announcements. You're looking to take some shots at specific people, because I won't publish a hit piece, no matter how justified it might seem. I want to talk about working families who sacrifice for their parents, about nursing home residents who are sometimes forgotten by children who moved away and got busy with their own lives, about the dignity of aging in a society that worships youth and discards the elderly like broken appliances. Tom nodded slowly. That's a story worth telling. You got any writing experience? I wrote logistics reports for 23 years. I can make my point clearly. All right. Give me 1,000 words by Friday. We'll run it as a guest editorial. The op-ed ran the following Thursday under the headline, When Love Matters More Than Appearances. Ray wrote about the diner waitress who raised a son alone, about the woman who never missed a school play, despite working double shifts, about families who understood that caring for elderly relatives wasn't a burden but a privilege. He mentioned Mary by name, her years of sacrifice, her quiet dignity, her grace in facing the confusion and fear of dementia. He wrote about the wedding that brought joy to a woman who had given everything for her family, and the community response that proved some people still understood the difference between what was easy and what was right. The piece ended with a simple statement. Some people measure success by their social standing, their membership in exclusive clubs, their ability to impress strangers with expensive celebrations. I measure success by keeping promises to the people who sacrificed everything for me. I measure it by honoring the woman who showed me what unconditional love looks like. The editorial spread beyond Ashford Hollow faster than anyone expected. Regional newspapers picked it up. Social media platforms shared excerpts. Ray began receiving calls from nursing homes across the state, inviting him to speak at family events and fundraising dinners. Mr. Morgan, said Janet Rodriguez, the Silver Pines administrator, during a meeting in her office overlooking the garden, where Nana's wedding had taken place, we've received more donation offers in the past month than in the previous 2 years combined. 3 different foundations want to feature our facility in their funding proposals. Ray nodded, unsurprised. Mom would like knowing that something good came from her story. It's more than that, though. We've had families drive from 3 states away to visit our facility. They're saying they want their elderly relatives to receive the same kind of dignity and respect they saw in your wedding photos. How's Mom handling all the attention? Janet's expression grew gentle. She has good days and bad days. Yesterday, she remembered the wedding clearly, talked about how beautiful Nina looked. This morning, she asked me who all those people in the garden were. Ray felt the familiar ache in his chest, but Janet continued. She's not distressed by the confusion. She seems happy, peaceful, like she accomplished something important, and now she can rest. That afternoon, Ray drove to the Regional Foundation office in Charlotte, where he met with directors who wanted to fund a new memory care wing at Silver Pines. The meeting lasted 2 hours, with Ray answering questions about his mother's care, the challenges facing families with dementia patients, and the importance of maintaining dignity and connection, even as cognitive abilities declined. "Your story has touched something important," said Foundation President Michael Chun as he walked Ray to the elevator afterward. "We've been looking for ways to improve elder care in rural communities. Your mother's wedding has become a symbol of what's possible when families and institutions work together." Ray shook the man's hand, thinking about how his simple promise to his mother had rippled outward in ways he never could have imagined. "The credit belongs to the Silver Pines staff," Ray said. "They made the wedding possible. But you made the choice to put your mother's happiness above social expectations. That's the real story here." As Ray drove back to Ashford Hollow, he passed billboards advertising the country club where Leela had wanted Nina's wedding held. The signs promised elegance, sophistication, and memories to last a lifetime. But Ray knew the truth. The most important memories were built from love, not luxury, and the most elegant celebrations were the ones that honored what mattered most. The consequences came swift and merciless, like a summer storm that had been building on the horizon for weeks, before finally breaking over Ashford Hollow's carefully maintained social structure. At tea, the monthly charity board meeting, Patricia Wells cornered Judith in the parking lot of the country club, her usual friendly mask replaced by cold calculation. "We found your daughter-in-law's anonymous social media account," Patricia said without preamble. "The posts about the nursing home wedding, the comments about trashy families and social suicide. Very enlightening reading." Judith's face crumbled like old parchment. "Patricia, you know Lila didn't mean those things. She was upset, emotional about the situation. We know exactly what she meant. The board voted this morning. You're both out, effective immediately." "You can't be serious. I've been on this board for 15 years. And in 15 years, you've never shown this level of public callousness toward your own family. We can't have board members who mock elderly relatives for social media likes. It reflects poorly on our charitable mission." Patricia turned to walk away, then paused. "For what it's worth, Judith, most of us thought Ray made the right choice. It takes real character to put an elderly parent's happiness above social convenience." Inside the country club, Leela sat alone at a table set for 6, watching her usual brunch companions eat at a different table across the dining room. They'd seen her come in, had made eye contact, but no one had issued the customary invitation to join them. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, people unfriending her on social media, canceling lunch dates, removing her from group chats and email lists. The social network she'd spent years building was collapsing like a house of cards in a windstorm. Rebecca Stone walked past her table without stopping, then returned as if she'd forgotten something. "Leela," she said with false sweetness, "I wanted to let you know we've decided to hold the spring fundraiser planning meeting at Margaret's house instead of yours. We thought it might be more appropriate." "Rebecca, please, let me explain about those posts." "No explanation necessary. We all understand exactly what kind of person would mock their husband's ailing mother for internet points." Lila's face burned with shame and anger. "She's not dying, isn't she? Because from what I hear, Ray's been spending every day at that nursing home since the wedding, helping her through what everyone knows are final months. While you've been more concerned about salvaging your reputation than supporting your family," Rebecca said, then walked away, leaving Leela alone with her untouched mimosa and the weight of her isolation. That evening, Leela drove home to find Ray's truck missing from the driveway. Inside the house, she discovered boxes stacked in the hallway, his clothes, books, and personal belongings packed with the methodical efficiency of a man who had made up his mind. Ray emerged from the master bedroom, carrying his last box of belongings, his face expressing nothing but tired resignation. "What are you doing?" Leela asked, though the answer was obvious. "Moving to the guest room. Permanently." "Ray, we need to talk about this situation. About our marriage. About how to move forward." "No, we don't." He carried the box down the hall without making eye contact, setting it down in the spare bedroom that would become his new sanctuary. "I'm sorry about the posts," Leela called after him. "I was angry and hurt, and I said things I didn't mean." "You said exactly what you meant. You revealed exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching." Leela followed him down the hall, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'll do anything to fix this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. I'll apologize publicly, take responsibility for my mistakes." Ray set the box down and turned to face her, his eyes empty of any warmth or affection. "You can't fix what you never valued. I value our marriage. You value your reputation. You value your status in this community. You value your ability to look down on people you consider beneath you. You've never valued my mother, and you certainly don't value me." "That's not true. Prove it." Ray's challenge hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. "Tell me one thing you've sacrificed for this family. One time you put someone else's needs above your own image or convenience." Leela opened her mouth to respond, then closed it as the truth settled over her like a lead blanket. She couldn't think of a single example. In 24 years of marriage, she had always found ways to make her choices seem like the practical, sensible options that just happened to align with what she wanted anyway. "That's what I thought," Ray said quietly. The silence stretched between them like a chasm that had been widening for years without either of them noticing. "You can't just give up on us," Leela said weakly. "I gave up on us the night you mocked my mother on social media for likes from strangers." Ray walked into the guest room and closed the door behind him with quiet finality. Lila stood in the hallway, surrounded by the house they'd shared for over 2 decades, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. Outside, the sun set over Ashford Hollow, casting long shadows across a community that was slowly learning the difference between reputation and character, between appearances and truth. 3 weeks later, Ray sat in attorney David Park's office in downtown Ashford Hollow. Documents spread across the mahogany desk like evidence in a criminal trial. The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating bank statements, medical records, and financial authorizations that told a story Ray was only beginning to understand. "I need you to review my mother's financial records," Ray said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Something doesn't add up with her medical account." David Park had been practicing elder law for 15 years, and he'd seen every form of financial abuse that families could inflict on their elderly relatives. He examined the bank statements with the practiced eye of someone who knew exactly what to look for. "What exactly raised your suspicions?" David asked, adjusting his reading glasses. "I was reviewing her care expenses for tax purposes, and there's $5,000 missing from her medical account. Cash withdrawal made last spring, when she was already showing significant cognitive decline. Do you have access to these records as her power of attorney?" "Medical power of attorney, yes. But Leela has been handling the day-to-day banking since Mom moved into Silver Pines. I trusted her to manage the expenses appropriately." David's finger stopped on a line item dated May 15th. "Here, $5,000 cash withdrawal, signed authorization on file." Ray studied the signature, recognizing Layla's handwriting immediately, the careful loops and practiced flourishes that had signed Christmas cards and school permission slips for years. "Can you trace where this money actually went? If there are receipts, credit card records, anything showing how the cash was used?" David paused, studying Ray's face. "Do you have reason to believe it wasn't used for your mother's care?" Ray's jaw hardened. Last May, Layla took a girls' trip to that luxury spa resort in Charleston, the Grand Charleston Wellness Retreat. 5 days, full treatment package. She said she paid for it with money she'd been saving from her household allowance. And you think? I think she stole $5,000 from my mother's medical account to pay for a spa vacation, while my mother sat in a nursing home eating institutional food and wearing the same 3 dresses because we supposedly couldn't afford to buy her new clothes. David nodded grimly. This constitutes financial elder abuse under North Carolina law. If proven, it's a felony. I want financial guardianship transferred to me immediately, today, if possible. Ray, this is a serious accusation. If you pursue this legally, it will destroy your wife's reputation completely. It could result in criminal charges. She destroyed her own reputation when she chose to steal from a woman with dementia. David began pulling forms from his filing cabinet. I'll need medical documentation of your mother's cognitive state at the time of the withdrawal. Evidence that she couldn't have authorized this expense herself. I have letters from her doctor, neurological assessments, cognitive evaluations. Mom hasn't been competent to make financial decisions since her diagnosis 2 years ago, and you'll need to prove the money was used for personal expenses rather than your mother's care. Ray pulled out his phone and showed David a photo. Layla and her friends at the spa resort, all holding champagne glasses and laughing as they lounged by an infinity pool. The timestamp showed May 17, 2 days after the withdrawal. She posted this on her social media, bragging about the luxury treatments, the gourmet meals, the 5-star accommodations, while my mother was asking me why she couldn't afford a new nightgown that didn't have holes in it. David examined the photo, then pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. I'll draw up the paperwork for emergency guardianship transfer. Given the financial abuse allegations and your mother's cognitive state, the court should approve it quickly. How quickly? If we file today, you could have temporary guardianship by the end of the week. Full transfer within a month. Ray nodded, feeling something cold and final settle in his chest. Do it. That evening, Ray sat beside his mother's bed at Silver Pines, holding her hand as she drifted in and out of sleep. Mary's breathing had grown more labored over the past weeks, her moments of clarity becoming increasingly rare. But she seemed peaceful, as if she'd accomplished what she needed to do, and could now rest. I'm sorry, Mom, Ray whispered. I should have protected you better. I should have watched the accounts more carefully. Mary's eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with effort. Ray, I'm here. Did Nina have a beautiful wedding? Ray smiled, despite the tears threatening to fall. Even in her confusion, his mother's priorities remained clear. The most beautiful wedding in the world, Mom. You were there. You saw her walk down the aisle. Good. Mary's voice was barely a whisper. That's all I wanted, to see my granddaughter happy. She's happy, Mom. And she knows how much you love her. Mary smiled weakly, her eyes already beginning to close again. Good. That's what matters. Ray sat with her through the night, holding her hand and listening to her labored breathing. By morning, Mary Morgan had passed away peacefully in her sleep, her hands still clasped in her son's. The woman who had worked 2 jobs to raise him alone, who had sacrificed everything for his happiness, who had asked for only one thing in her final months, to see her granddaughter's wedding, was gone. But she had gotten her wish. And Ray had kept his promise. 1 year later, Ray stood in the Silver Pines garden on a crisp October morning, unveiling a bronze plaque mounted on a granite stone positioned near the spot where Nina and Trevor had exchanged vows. The inscription read, "To those who never stop fighting for love, even when the world mocks them." In memory of Mary Morgan, 1940 to 2025, who taught us that family means keeping promises, Nina approached, carrying a baby girl with bright eyes and wispy gray hair that caught the morning sunlight like spun silver. The child gurgled happily, reaching tiny fingers toward the colorful autumn leaves dancing in the breeze. She would have loved her, Nina said softly, adjusting the baby's pink blanket. Mary Hope Dean. Ray read from the birth certificate Nina had brought to show him. Perfect name for a perfect little girl. Trevor joined them, his work clothes still bearing the honest stains of engine grease and hard labor. He'd successfully opened his own auto repair shop 6 months earlier, built on a reputation for fair prices and quality work that had spread throughout the community. "The administrator wants to talk to you about expanding the volunteer coordinator position," Trevor said, nodding toward the nursing home building. "Make it full-time with benefits." Ray nodded thoughtfully. 3 days a week, he helped families navigate the challenges of elder care, writing grant applications, organizing activities, and sitting with residents who had no visitors. The work filled a hole in his life that had opened when Mary passed, giving him purpose and connection to something larger than his own grief. "Any word from Mom?" Nina asked quietly, though they all knew the answer. "No, and there won't be." Leela had moved back in with Judith after the divorce was finalized. Both women lived in social exile now, their reputations destroyed beyond any hope of repair. The financial abuse charges had made the local newspapers, and the story of a woman who stole from her husband's mother to fund a luxury spa vacation had traveled far beyond Ashford Hollow's borders. They lived together in Judith's smaller house on the less fashionable side of town. Two women who had spent their lives climbing social ladders that ultimately led nowhere. Their former friends crossed streets to avoid them. Their charity organizations had publicly distanced themselves from their involvement. Even the country club had quietly suggested they consider membership elsewhere. Ray had kept the house, the savings, and most importantly, his self-respect. He'd never spoken to either woman again after the day the guardianship transfer was approved. He'd never forgiven them for what they'd done to Mary. And he never would. But he'd discovered something more valuable than their apologies or their suffering. The knowledge that he'd kept every promise to the woman who'd raised him. Mary had seen her granddaughter's wedding. She died knowing she was loved, honored, and remembered. "I have something for you," Ray said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "From Mom's effects." Nina opened it carefully, revealing the handwritten note in Mary's shaky script. "My dearest Nina, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to tell you myself how proud I am of the woman you've become. Thank you for giving me the most beautiful wedding gift, the chance to see you marry for love. Take care of your father. He's the best man I ever knew. All my love, Grandma Mary." Tears streamed down Nina's face as she read the note aloud. Trevor put his arm around her shoulders, and baby Mary Hope gurgled as if she understood the importance of the moment. "She wrote this the day after the wedding," Ray explained, "gave it to Janet Rodriguez to hold until—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. As the sun climbed higher over Ashford Hollow, Ray walked back toward the nursing home, ready for another day of choosing love over appearances, substance over status, and loyalty over convenience. Behind him, the plaque caught the morning light, a permanent reminder that some battles were worth fighting, no matter what the world thought. And in the end, Mary Morgan had won the only victory that mattered. She'd been loved completely, honored deeply, and remembered forever by people who understood that family meant keeping promises, even when keeping them cost everything else. The moral of the story was written not in words on a plaque, but in the lives of the people who chose to put love first when it would have been easier to choose everything else. And in a world that too often measured success by wealth, status, and social media likes, that was a lesson worth preserving for future generations to discover.